With 2021 coming to a close and soon after, year 4 of Destiny 2, I wanted to make a top 10 tier list of PvP legendary adaptive frame hand cannons that we currently have in the game. A few things to take note of before we get into the top 10 is firstly, this list contains only legendary non-sunset hand cannons in Destiny 2. There are specific activities that restrict your artifact levels, and using sunset weapons heavily hinders your gear score, putting you at a disadvantage, so I felt it unfair to include these weapons when you can only use them in some activities. Second, there will not be any adept or time-lost weapons included in this list. These weapons are obviously better than their non-adept counterparts due to their intrinsically increased stats, and they can take advantage of adept weapon mods, and again, I feel it to be unfair to include these weapons that can A, take advantage of mods that some weapons cannot, and B, are only earned through specific in-game activities that some players may not be able to obtain. In short, I wanted this top 10 list to be as apples to apples as possible. And lastly, when each weapon is introduced, the specific role I am using during the gameplay footage will be displayed briefly before the footage begins. With all that out of the way, let's get started.
Number 10.
Coming in at the bottom of the list in the D tier is FINITE IMPACTOR. This weapon is the most recently released Iron Banner hand cannon, and it has a lot to live up to, as Steady Hand and previously Criminal's Dagger are and were some of the best that Iron Banner had to offer, and are some of the best hand cannons in the game. However, FINITE IMPACTOR has failed to live up to the standards of its predecessors. FINITE IMPACTOR's damage fall-off begins at the second shortest range out of all adaptive hand cannons, so right off the bat, this weapon needs some help in the range department. The perk pool is below average at best, as the only perks that assist range are Ricochet rounds in the second column, Killing Wind, which requires a kill to activate, and Iron Reach, which is a slightly improved version of Rangefinder, but heavily penalizes your stability. While using this weapon, I felt like reacquiring targets between shots was rather difficult. This is most likely due to its extremely low aim assist stat of 74. Adding enemy flinch onto that makes 1v1 gunfights extremely difficult to win. The role that I used included multi-kill clip, which, when I was able to snag a final blow, made the weapon feel much better, but getting a final blow in the first place was a struggle, at least for me, personally.
Number 9.
Coming in at number 9, we have Waking Vigil. This Dreaming City hand cannon was a direct competitor to the infamous spare rations during year 3 when 150 RPM hand cannons existed, but its reprised 140 RPM version is a shadow of its former self. Having the worst damage falloff out of any adaptive frame hand cannon, range is definitely its main concern, similar to FINITE IMPACTOR. However, Waking Vigil can roll Rangefinder and Opening Shot at the same time, giving it a much needed range buff. This perk combination, along with an extra 2 shots in the magazine, make it a much better choice than FINITE IMPACTOR from a consistency standpoint, but a lack of stability makes prolonged engagements and target reacquisition extremely tough. While using this hand cannon, I felt it was easier to hit my first shot in an engagement, but hitting those follow-up shots with an extremely lacking stability stat is not the easiest thing to do, which is why it is sitting at number 9.
Number 8.
Moving on to the C tier at number 8, we have Dire Promise, another direct competitor to spare rations, similar to Waking Vigil. Dire Promise is a fan favorite, having been reprised during Season of the Worthy at 150 rounds per minute, and a pretty impressive perk pool. While it was a lightweight frame hand cannon, this was one of my go-to hand cannons, especially when I could not get a spare rations to drop with anything remotely decent for over a year. Dire Promise's raw range comes in at 45, which is better than Waking Vigil or FINITE IMPACTOR, but still needs some assistance to compete with the big boys. Fortunately, it can roll Opening Shot and Range Finder at the same time, with snapshot sights being able to replace Opening Shot depending on which perk you prefer. The stability set on this weapon is slightly below average, which would make you think that hitting shots would be slightly more difficult than normal, but here's my biggest complaint with this weapon. The recoil direction of Dire Promise is 84, which means when firing the weapon it pulls up and to the right, and with the stability stat it has, it pulls quite significantly. I had many gunfights where many of my shots missed right because I was not accounting for the horizontal recoil. Putting a counterbalance stock mod on will make the recoil much more vertical, but then you miss out on targeting adjuster or Icarus grip. While Dire Promise is a vast improvement on Waking Vigil and FINITE IMPACTOR, there are still quite a few better choices when it comes to hand cannons.
Number 7.
At number 7, we have Nation of Beasts. Dropping from the Last Wish raid, you will not encounter this weapon out in the wild very often. Known mostly for its really impressive PvE prowess, this weapon has a few unique perk rolls that make it a really solid weapon in the Crucible. While it does have quite a bit less range overall than Dire Promise, there are quite a few perks that can offset the difference, including Small Bore, Hammer Forged Rifling, and Accurized Rounds. The third and fourth perk columns do not have many perks to choose from, but what Nation of Beasts does have makes it a force to be reckoned with. Opening Shot in the third column closes the range gap even more with Dire Promise, and the ability to roll explosive payload in the 4th slot completely nullifies a significant portion of damage fall off that you might experience. While using this weapon, I really like the sights, as the minimalistic design and the design on the top of the weapon help me realign the sights to my target, which help keep up that optimal time to kill. A near completely vertical recoil pattern and a stability stat that is a whopping 11 higher than Dire Promise is why I put it at number 7.
Number 6.
As we get into the B tier of adaptive hand cannons, we have Annual Skate at number 6. This world drop hand cannon is a Cinderella story, as I was not expecting much at all from this gun after experiencing a lot of trouble using FINITE IMPACTOR, which is also a Suros hand cannon like Annual Skate. What I found was that the perk combinations on this weapon aid in both range and slaying potential. On paper, Annual Skate has very similar stats to FINITE IMPACTOR, but the perk pool is immensely better. The role I personally used was Outlaw and Multi-Kill Clip, but there are much better combinations that you can get. Slide Shot can roll on this weapon in the 3rd column, which is a free 20 range and 30 stability for 3 seconds so long as you slide to start your engagement, which is very common in Destiny 2. In the 4th column, you can roll Opening Shot to further increase your range on your first shot, or you can also roll Time Payload, which is more or less the same perk as Explosive Payload with a short delay. Wellspring is an interesting perk for PvP now that every ability has had their cooldowns changed, so if you really like to spam your abilities, then Wellspring may be the perk for you. While using this gun, I found that with Multi-Kill Clip and Outlaw, I could really chain some kills together. Every now and then I had some trouble hitting follow-up shots in an engagement, but more often than not, the small bump to my aim assist thanks to my fast draw sight was enough to get the job done.
Number 5.
Judgment is one of my favorite hand cannons to use and is coming in at number 5. Dropping from the Phalanx Echo boss fight within the Prophecy dungeon, Judgment is a very jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none weapon, but its versatility is what puts it so high in the top 10. All of its main stats, range, handling, and stability, hover right around 60, depending on 1st and 2nd column perks, which is not bad, but not great. What makes this weapon one of my favorites is the different jobs this gun can do depending on your 3rd and 4th column perks. In the 3rd column, there is no such thing as a bad perk for PvP. Demolitionist can roll in the 3rd slot, and Judgment is the only hand cannon in the entire game that can roll that perk in the 3rd slot, and with all the grenade changes, Demolitionist is extremely viable to have. Ensemble and Encore can roll in this 3rd slot, which give boosts to handling and range or stability respectively. The 4th perk column is nowhere near as good as the 3rd column, but there are still some good things to look out for. Opening Shot is always a handy perk, as is Time Payload, or if you're looking to get some kill streaks, Multi-Kill Clip may be the way to go. The biggest complaint I have with Judgment is the 9-round magazine. 9 rounds should be more than enough to kill someone, but engaging a 2nd target immediately after shooting at the 1st target can be a big problem, especially when the only reload perk the weapon can get is Slide Shot and, to a lesser degree, Demolitionist.
Number 4.
Moving into the A tier, we have my personal favorite hand cannon, Ancient Gospel. Dropping after defeating the Consecrated Mind in the Garden of Salvation raid, Ancient Gospel has only recently made its way into my spotlight. Back in year 3, when all that mattered on a hand cannon was it being 150 RPM and having as much range as possible, Ancient Gospel did little more than collect dust in my vault, as did every other adaptive hand cannon, as they were inferior to lightweight frames in every way. Now that lightweights no longer exist, Ancient Gospel has come to play, sporting a perfectly vertical recoil pattern and a perk pool with combinations only found on this particular weapon. Eye of the Storm is the perk unique to Ancient Gospel's 3rd column, as no other hand cannon in Destiny 2 can get Eye of the Storm in this slot. This perk activates when your shields are near depleted, which typically always happens in a gunfight. When it gets going, your aim assist goes through the roof and hitting shots is easier than ever before. Pair this with something like Kill Clip in the 4th slot and you have an extremely potent killing tool. Of course, Rapid Hit and Outlaw are also available if you prefer reload perks, or if you do not roll accurized rounds or just want some more range, Rangefinder is also available in the 4th slot.
Number 3.
Making its triumphant return in the new and improved Vault of Glass raid, Fatebringer is still just as good as it was in the original Destiny. What it lacks in raw range, it more than makes up for with a plethora of range perks as well as some interesting unique combinations that only Fatebringer can roll. With nearly all of the 1st column perks granting a bonus to range and accurized rounds being available in the 2nd column, it is not uncommon to have a pretty significant range boost before taking into account your other 2 perks. The 2 most noteworthy and unique perks to the 3rd slot for Fatebringer is Thresh and Explosive Payload. With practically every super outside of Well of Radiance and Ward of Dawn having a much longer cooldown than before, Thresh can allow you to gain more super energy at an increased rate depending on how many kills you get. As always, Explosive Payload is always welcome on a gun if you feel its range is not up to snuff. Fortunately, you can pair one of those perks with one of the 4th column perks, in which nearly all are desirable. Eye of the Storm can roll in the 4th column, which is very underrated in my opinion, or you can get something like Kill Clip and have the ability to really chain kills together. Opening Shot can also roll in the 4th slot, which is always useful.
Number 2.
We are now moving into the S tier, the cream of the crop. and we have Palindrome at number 2. Dropping from Nightfall Strikes, Palindrome has the second best damage fall-off range and a perk pool chock full of everything a PvP player would want. While the raw range stat does not appear to be outstanding, the selection of first and second column perks will more than likely grant you some sort of boost to range. Nearly every first column barrel perk will boost range, and the second column has high caliber rounds, ricochet rounds, armor piercing rounds, and light mag to boost range. The third and fourth column perks are what make this hand cannon special. The ideal combination for Palindrome is Quick Draw and Rangefinder. This combination can only roll on one other hand cannon, Nature of the Beast, which is a 180 RPM precision frame weapon. Outlaw is also available in the third slot, as well as Killing Wind, both of which are solid perks to have in PvP. Overflow can roll in the third slot, which is an interesting PvP perk. Picking up special ammo is usually not a huge issue or hard to do, so if you really enjoy 20 shots in the magazine, then consider Overflow. Besides Rangefinder in the final slot, Rampage, Thresh, and High Impact Reserves are all available. Overflow and Rampage seems to be a very synergetic combination, and High Impact Reserves, if you empty out 5 shots beforehand, can turn Palindrome into a feast or famine weapon. On paper, the only redeeming quality of Palindrome seems to be its range, but when you actually have it in your hands and are using it, a high range roll Palindrome can outgun nearly every weapon in Destiny 2.
Number 1.
Making its return from the original Destiny and dropping from Captain Avarot, the Covetous, within the grasp of Avarice dungeon, we have EYASLUNA. This beloved hand cannon was extremely popular in the original Destiny, and it is everything it once was and more. The raw stats are impeccable, the perk pool is amazing for both PvE and PvP, and it is arguably easier and faster to get than something like Palindrome. Similar to Palindrome, the second column of perks on EYASLUNA are the exact same, which makes it incredibly easy to get a range bonus on top of an already very good raw range stat. EYASLUNA's sight options are, in my opinion, not as great to have as opposed to something like Palindrome's barrel perks, but EYASLUNA makes up for it by having the best-in-class damage fall-off range, which means you do not have to worry as much about rolling perks in the first 2 slots that boost range. The final 2 perk columns have some really good combinations. The preferred PvP roll is Rangefinder, found in the 3rd slot, and either Snapshot Sights or Moving Target in the 4th column, both of which are very good for the column and are more or less personal preference. Kill Clip and Demolitionist are both available in the 4th slot, and Outlaw and Rabbit Hit are available in the 3rd slot if those types of perks are what suit you the best. All in all, I put EYASLUNA at the top because it is what gave me the most confidence and the best results during my playtime. So that wraps up my top 10 legendary adaptive frame hand cannons at the end of year 4 of Destiny 2. If you enjoyed, please leave a like on the video and let me know down in the comments what your top 10 adaptive hand cannons are. Be sure to subscribe as there is more content to come. Again, I hope you enjoyed and I wish you nothing but the best in 2022.